I.Pavlenko, From Family to Family, Chapter 2, Part 8, Liberation, read by Natalia Buzova. Meanwhile, the artillery shelling became closer and louder. We listened all night and hardly slept. In the morning, no one unlocked the barn, but through the cracks we noticed that either the SS or the police were approaching with the dog. They began to board the door tightly. We were scared. Will they burn us? And we immediately began to dig underground tunnels with spoons and hands in several places under the barn in order to jump out at the last moment and run away. Meanwhile, the firefight, already automatic, was very close, and the Germans ran away. Half an hour passed. Suddenly, we heard the voices of the girls. Someone tore off the boards and knocked down the lock. The door opened, and 2 English soldiers entered, accompanied by the girls. We realized that it was liberation. We climbed out of our straw dens and shouted in Russian and German, "We are Russian, Soviet," and there were tears in our eyes. They took us out into the fresh air, treated to cigarettes, and then one of them ran somewhere. Half an hour later, German ambulances arrived and took us straight to the hospital. There we first underwent sanitation, then a medical examination and a commission. Several were put on treatment, and the rest were dressed in clean clothes and taken to a local transit camp, which consisted mainly of those whom the Germans had forcibly brought there from Ukraine and Belarus. We joined them. Thus, my wanderings through the labyrinths of fascist hell ended. 2 years and 9 months. I wrote about it a little briefly because there would neither be enough for my lifetime for everything nor my literary skills, and it hurts to mention in detail those lice and worms, the death rails and naked corpses which had not yet cooled but were undressed and thrown into the funeral carts. One could talk about the moral and psychological qualities of desperate people, the extent to which they lose the human and acquire the anti-human, but I will not touch on this topic because it is very painful and in some ways I can be wrong. 1942 was terrible for me. 1944 was risky and dangerous. But according to the prisoners, the worst year was 1941, when there were millions of prisoners. They told about the terrible Uman pit, where the Nazis drove up to 100,000 captured soldiers and commanders of the besieged and defeated 6th and 12th armies. The camps in Chelm near Smolensk, Kharkiv, and Horol, where Hitler's villains killed prisoners for fun, were badly mentioned. There was also a bad reputation about the transit camp number 336, led by a guerrilla-like Sashka. He was said to have been caught somewhere in Germany in 1945 and torn to pieces. And the whole world knows what happened in such death camps as Buchenwald, Auschwitz, Majdanek. As it is known from historical sources from ancient times, the captives were treated as defeated enemies by various nations. They were killed, their skulls were used for drinking at banquets, they were even fried on fire and eaten. But those were the times of savagery and barbarism. How could the nation of Goethe and Schiller, Bach and Beethoven, Kant and Hegel in the 20th century get to such cruelty? Soviet prisoners were massacred and burnt in furnaces, starved, taken out in the cold and dosed with water. And all this was substantiated theoretically as a means of cleansing humanity from the inferior Slavic race and communist defilement. A handful of adventurers and just villains poisoned the mind of their compatriots with fierce hatred of other peoples, and instead of great humanists of the past, bred on German soil pathological sadists who killed, hanged, bent in gas chambers in the name of delusional Aryan supremacy and world domination.